So year one parent meeting, St George's. So it's Miss Downs and Mrs Palmer today, and obviously we've got Mrs Pennington, who's the Badgers class teaching assistant. Obviously she couldn't be here now, but she'll be available if you want to ask any questions at the beginning or the end of the day. So the agenda for the meeting is we'll be going through the national curriculum for English, which includes reading. We'll also be talking about science, so all the expectations and the teaching that we'll be doing in year one. We'll also talk a little bit about the phonics screening check, which is taking place in June next year. We'll be telling you things that you need to know, so vocabulary that you might not have heard of before. We'll go through a little bit of a glossary of terms that you might not have heard of before, things that you can do to help at home, and then we'll do questions at the end. So we'll start with just a little bit of background information about the start of year one. So obviously, because the year was cut short last year, we're still doing a transition from reception. They did quite a lot of child initiated in reception, and we will be continuing that on in year one, sort of in the early stages, probably more up to Christmas. We'll kind of see how it goes on kind of a termly basis. And if we need to have a bit longer on child initiated, then we will. It's kind of led by the children, really. So if they need a little bit more of child initiated, then we'll carry it on for a little bit longer. At the moment, we're just doing short, sharp bursts of activity. So they'll work with an adult on a maths task. They'll work with an adult on an English task. And then the rest of the children will be doing independent activities, such as reading, a bit of mindfulness colouring, or I'll put some games out for them to play based on the learning that we've already done, just to consolidate it. I thought it would be a good idea to do the short, sharp task, just to make sure that they're concentrating on what they're doing, because I find that if you get a 5-year-old to try and sit for half an hour doing something, they very often lose focus. So their tasks don't tend to last much longer than 10 or 15 minutes. But we always make sure that they finish it. So if it does take them a bit longer, then that's fine. And as I said, that child initiated will be continuing until at least Christmas. So we're on to the national curriculum. This is going to be focusing on reading. So the expectations that your child will hopefully be able to do by the end of year one. So this is quite small, but I will read it for you. So this first bit is based on just word reading. So they should be able to apply their phonic knowledge and skills to decode words. So that involves their segmenting and blending their words. They should be able to know all of their phonemes, so all of their sounds from their phases, and they should be able to read those very quickly. And sometimes there's alternative sounds for different letters, for different graphemes as well. So they need to know all of those. They need to be able to use their sound work to blend sounds in unfamiliar words using the sounds that have been taught already. There's also common exception words that they need to know. So a common exception word is a word that can't be written or read using sounds. They're just words that they need to know. There's some suffix words that they need to know, words with more than one syllable in them, words with contractions. They need to be able to read aloud books that are consistent with their phonic knowledge. So we're making sure that all the children are on the right level, depending on their phonic skills and knowledge at the moment. And obviously they'll move through the books as their phonic knowledge develops. And they also need to be building up their fluency. So just getting a little bit quicker and a bit more confident with their reading. Another side of reading is the comprehension. So that's understanding what they've read. So they need to be able to listen to and discuss a wide range of poems, stories and non-fiction. So we're not just looking for them to be reading fiction books. We want them to read a variety of genres, a variety of types of texts. Sometimes they'll access those at school. Sometimes they might do some writing around those, and sometimes they might be sent home. And obviously, if you have any non-fiction books or any books that you have at home that you would like to, that you feel the children would benefit from reading, you can read those, and you can also pop those in their reading record that you've read those as well. They need to be familiar, as I said, with all different types of stories, including fairy stories and traditional tales, and kind of the different sorts of ingredients, if you like, of different genres. and they need to discuss word meaning, so just building their vocabulary, and maybe linking sort of new words to words that they already know, or familiar words that they might have heard of before, and just using that to help them read the words. They also need to be able to sequence the story. So when they've read a book, it's a good idea to kind of get them to retell the story and say what bits they enjoyed and which bits they didn't like and things like that. And then there's a point about making inference on the basis of what is being said and done. So that's talking about how the characters might be feeling, things that are happening in the picture. So how did that picture come to pass? And kind of talking about things that aren't obvious from reading the words. And also predictions of what might happen next. So sometimes when I'm reading with the children, when we get to the end of the book, I might ask them to tell me what might happen if the story carried on. So just making an appropriate prediction on what they've already read. With regards to the phonics screening check, that's taking place in June 2021, and children will be assessed on all of their sounds. They will have 40 words to read. And the pass mark, that's wrong actually, it doesn't change every year. Sometimes it stays the same. Last year they had to get 32 out of 40 to pass. And I think it's been 32 for the last couple of years. They might change it. We don't know yet. We won't know until just before the phonics screening takes place. And if they don't meet the pass mark, then they'll have an opportunity to retake it in year 2. So just so you're familiar with what the phonics screening check looks like. These words are known as alien words or nonsense words to the children, and they're just kind of assessing the children's segmenting and blending. They don't have to talk about them, they don't have to know what they mean, they literally just have to segment them and blend them, just to check that they know their sounds. And then they'll have some real words based on sounds that they've learned as well. Again, just literally just segmenting and blending the word. And then the teacher who is assessing them will have this answer sheet, and we'll literally tick if it's correct, tick if it's incorrect, and if it was incorrect, we might put how they did read it. So just a comment on what they said instead. And as I said, depending on what the pass mark is, if they pass, great. If they don't, then they'll have to retake it in year 2. So that's reading. So with writing, again, there's different sections that we have to focus on. So with spelling, they need to be using all of their sounds to help with their spelling. They need to be able to write their common exception words correctly. I think I put the common exception words on the PowerPoint that was on the website, but if I haven't, I'd be more than happy to print out a copy to put them in their reading record. So if you wanted a copy of those, then just pop a note in their contact book and I'll get that done for you. They also need to know how to write the days of the week, but we go through that regularly in school. Every day we do the calendar, so they're seeing those days of the week every day. They need to know the alphabet, but we do that every day in phonics. They need to know letter names, so instead of just the sound A, they need to know that that letter is A, B, C, D, etc. They need to know prefixes and suffixes. So prefix is something that goes before a word and a suffix is something that goes after a word. So the suffixes that they need to know are ing, ed, er and est, and the prefix they need to know is un. But they will be exposed to more than that, but they're the ones that they need to know by the end of year 1. They also need to be able to write a simple sentence dictated by the teacher, but again, we do that regularly during the day anyway. Handwriting. We do teach handwriting. I try to do it every day, but if not, it's definitely 2 or 3 times a week. And they may get sent some home learning for handwriting as well in the future terms. So they should know how to hold a pencil correctly. They should be sitting at the table properly. So that's kind of feet flat on the floor and sitting up straight rather than hunching over, just to make sure that they can write neatly. They need to be forming their letters correctly, starting and finishing in the right place, because sometimes their letters look correct, but they haven't formed them correctly. But again, we do that as part of our handwriting sessions. They need to know the difference between a capital letter and a lowercase letter. They need to be able to form their digits from 0 to 9. We do that in maths. We do that in our daily lessons anyway. And the handwriting families. So you've got your ascenders, so your tall letters like T, L, K, H, and then you've got your descenders which go underneath the line. So P, Q, G. I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but that's the ones that I can remember. They also need to be thinking about composition. So we've been doing a lot of recently saying out loud what they are going to write about, because I think that really helps them use their sounds to help with their spelling. But also it helps with them putting their words in the correct order. And I always get them to repeat it about 3 or 4 times before they even start to attempt writing it. And as the year goes on, they might be writing sort of slightly longer pieces, but at the moment we're just doing simple sentences because I want them to make sure that they're putting their words in the correct order and making sure their writing makes sense. And as we get to the end of the year, they'll be rereading their own work to check that it makes sense. So they might be doing a little bit of self-assessment as the year goes on, but we won't be starting that till way on into year 1. And then they also need to maybe read their writing aloud, just to practice reading work out using expression and things like that. So writing continued. So this section is the vocabulary, grammar and punctuation. They need to be making sure that they're leaving spaces between words. So we're constantly talking about finger spaces in between their words. They need to be thinking about joining words. So and, because, then, next, etc. They need to be beginning to punctuate sentences using capital letters and full stops, question marks and exclamation marks. They see those regularly, and obviously depending on the genre, they'll be asked to use those as well. And they also need to know that they use a capital letter for names of people, places, days of the week, and the personal pronoun I. But as I say, that's kind of embedded in our daily writing lessons anyway. So if they forget something, I might get them to just check back and correct things. And just making sure that their writing makes sense, really. So instead of saying we was, they need to be writing we were and things like that. But again, that's mentioned every day anyway. And also when they're speaking to us, when we're having conversations with them, if their grammar isn't quite right, we do make sure that we correct them and get them to repeat it back to us. So now we're going to move on to maths. So this is what we're focusing on at the moment. This is quite a big chunk of the maths curriculum, the number and place value, because I think they need to have the sound understanding of number and place value before they move on to anything else, because there's no point teaching them anything else before they really understand numbers. So they need to be able to count to and across 100, both forwards and backwards. And that might not always begin with 0. It might be from any given number. They need to count, read and write numbers to 100 in numerals. So that's the digits, so what the number looks like when you write it down. They'll need to be able to count in multiples of 2s, 5s and 10s. They need to identify one more and one less than a number. They also need to represent numbers using objects and pictorial representations. So I think on their home learning web for this term, I asked them to represent the numbers 1 to 20 with things around the home, and I've been getting some very creative ideas. So I've been very impressed by that so far. They also need to use the language of equal to, more than, less than, most and least. So that comes from putting numbers in order. Today we worked on one more and one less. They also need to be able to read and write numbers from 1 to 20 in numerals and words. So again, they need to know how to spell numbers. Addition and subtraction. They need to be able to know what add and equals and minus mean. They need to know their number bonds to 10. I think that's been in their home learning for this term, but that will be taught as explicit lessons later on. And they need to be able to add and subtract 1-digit and 2-digit numbers using appropriate written methods. And they also need to be solving one-step problems with addition and subtraction, and also missing number problems. So they might have a number sentence with a box with a missing number in it, and they have to work out what the missing number is. Usually that comes from doing the inverse the opposite, but again, that will be taught explicitly in lessons. Multiplication and division, there's not too much in that, but they just need to be knowing different ways of representing multiplication and division. So that's concrete objects, pictorial representations, and arrays, which is when you put numbers in rows. And again, that's supported by the teacher, so that will be done in explicit lessons as well. Fractions, we'll be working on halves and quarters. With fractions, I like to keep it quite practical. We like to keep everything quite practical at St George's because we think that practical learning is just a bit more creative for the children, and I think they learn a little bit better from practical learning, especially with fractions. But yes, they need to know halves and quarters, whether that's of a number of objects or of a shape. Measurement, so this is quite a big chunk, but as I say, it will be covered over plenty of time. So they need to know about lengths and heights, mass and weight, capacity and volume, and time. And time comes from, I think it's o'clock and past. They need to be able to draw their hands on a clock face. They need to know about chronological order, so using the language of next, first, kind of that would come from talking about their daily routine and things like that. With money, they need to know the value of different coins and notes, and they need to be able to measure different things using appropriate units of measurement, so centimetres for length, grams and kilograms for weight, and millilitres and litres for capacity and volume. With geometry, they need to name common 2D and 3D shapes. So there's some names of some shapes that they need to know there. And we'll also be talking about the properties of those shapes as well, just to take the learning a little bit further. With position and direction, they need to know whole turns. So if you think about a clock, they need to know that a whole turn is 12, back round to 12. I usually teach different types of turns at the same time that I teach time. So that kind of, just that bit of cross-curricular learning. So that's maths. Science. Working scientifically is a big chunk of science. They need to know practical scientific methods. They need to be asking questions. They need to be observing using simple equipment. So that might be magnifying glasses, it might be tape measures, different things like that. Stopwatches, for example. They need to be performing simple tests. They need to be identifying and classifying. So last week, if you looked on Tapestry, we classified fruit into different groups using our senses. So that was a bit of classifying there. They could suggest some answers to questions, and we're also going to be starting to record data. So whether that's in a table or maybe as part of maths, we might be doing tallies, things like that. So in science, they should be exploring the world around them and raising their own questions. They need to be comparing objects, materials, living things. They need to be sorting and grouping them, observing changes over time, and hopefully with support they should be able to begin to notice patterns and relationships between different things. They should be able to, as I said, carry out simple measurements with recording that data, talking about what they found out. So just lots of discussion about what they're finding out in their science lessons, and that's across year 1 and year 2. So with regards to the year 1 programme of study, these plants, animals including humans, everyday materials and seasonal changes are the things that they should be taught in year 1, and I've just given you a time of when they'll be taught those things. So this term we're focusing on animals including humans, mainly humans because the topic is called Me, Myself and I, but I think animals come in year 2 when they talk about pets and habitats and different things like that. Here's some English vocabulary that might help you. So phonics is a method used for teaching reading that looks at the relationship between the spoken sound and the written letters. A phoneme is the sound that those letters make. A grapheme is what it looks like when you write it. A digraph is 2 letters that make 1 sound. so SH making the sh sound. A trigraph is 3 letters, so IGH making the I sound. Inference is using what you know to make a guess about something that you don't know. And prediction is guessing what might happen based on what has already been read to them or what they have already read. A common exception word is a word that cannot be written using sounds. There's some examples there. They're just ones that they need to know and just need to know off by heart, really. As I said earlier, if you want a sheet with all the common exception words for year 1, then I'd be happy to print one out and pop that in their contact book for them. A prefix is a group of letters that go at the beginning of a word to create a new word, for example, un in unhappy. A suffix is at the end of the word, so est to make tallest. GPC means grapheme phoneme correspondence, so making sure that the letters match the sound that is being written and read. And sequencing is making sure that things are in the correct order so that they make sense. Maths vocabulary. A numeral is the way that a number is written. A multiple is steps of counting. So the multiples of 2 are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Some children have been telling me that they can count in 2. Pictorial means a picture to show something. So, for example, 5 dots to show the number 5. Number bonds are 2 numbers that add together to make another number. So they're your number bonds to 10, but they're not always number bonds to 10. It's just any 2 numbers that add together to make another number. Concrete is the objects that we use to show something. So, for example, 4 bricks for the number 4. And a one-step problem is a scenario in which 1 step is required to solve the answer. So they just need to add, for example. 2-step problems come when they get to year 2 and beyond. Arrays, they are rows and columns to show a multiplication. For example, 5 times 3 would show 5 rows of 3 dots. And I think one child in the class did tell me about arrays last week, so I was quite impressed with that. Chronological means things in time order, using words like first, next, then and last. 2D means 2-dimensional, so flat shapes. 3D is 3-dimensional, your solid shapes. There's some examples there that they'll be learning this year. Not just those, but they're just there for an example. So things that you can do to help your child in English. So we need you to be reading regularly with them, ideally at least 3 times a week, if not every day. And you need to be signing in their reading record, and they need to read the book that they get given. They need to read that on 2 separate occasions, because we think that the first read should be about the word reading and the fluency, and the second read should be about the comprehension and understanding what they're reading. So making those inferences and predictions. Talk to your child regularly. I know that sounds a bit like a grandma teaching to suck eggs, but just encourage that conversation with your child. You know, talk to them about their day, taking turns in a conversation, so not talking over people, interrupting, things like that. When you're out and about, just describe everything. Get them to talk about what they can see, using their senses, things like that. Ask questions to them. Because sometimes children don't always know what a question is, and I'm teaching them to use question hands, to kind of put their hands out to the side and kind of wonder when they ask questions, and just encourage their imaginations. So get them out and about, really. In maths, take them shopping, add up the shopping, work out change. If you're feeling fancy, count up the coins. Get them to recognise those different coins that are used. Count literally everything you do, cars that go past, people, counting your steps, counting the stairs you walk up when you go up to bed, things like that. Literally counting everything, because that's what we're focusing on in maths at the moment. We're really focusing on counting at the moment. Talk about the time, how long it takes to get to places, how long it takes to do different things. Ask them what the time is. I think they quite like playing What's the Time, Mr. Wolf in the playground, so that's quite a popular game with them. And maybe when you're doing cooking or baking, weigh things with them, get them involved using the vocabulary like heavy, light, things like that. And some reminders, home learning. So home learning has been coming in. I'm really impressed with the home learning so far. From that sheet, you need to choose 6 tasks. and that needs to be done by October half term. And if you want to, you can take a photo of it and put it on tapestry, or you can get your child to bring a hard copy in their book bag, and it might go up on the amazing work display. Please read regularly with them and sign their reading record. As I said, 3 times a week would be ideal, but if you could do more, that's brilliant. Please make sure everything is named. We've had a couple of jumpers and cardigans that haven't had names in, so things have been getting lost. So if you could make sure that literally everything is named, and make sure that you're checking their contact books, because sometimes we don't always get the chance to say to you that, oh, we've written a message in their contact book. So if you could just check that regularly, and if there is a message in there, if you could just acknowledge that you've read it, even if you just sign your name, that would be great as well. And that's it. So we will have some questions now. Let me just put your... I think that's... Do I unmute them? I think they unmute themselves, don't they? So
perhaps if you've got a question, if you just use the raising hand icon, and then we can see who's got a question as we go. Okay,
Rupinder. You'll need to turn your microphone on.
Right. Can we have a copy of the PowerPoint rather than just the video?
Yes, a copy of the PowerPoint will be on the school website after this. Yeah.
Okay, great. We didn't think the other questions.
Any other questions? You want to click the hand up button.
Just, sorry, me again.
Oh, sorry, Rupinder, go on.
I was wondering, you know, when you do the screening test, is it like one child at a time? Is it all?
Yes, it's one child at a time. We go to a very quiet room, away from any noise or distraction, and it's just that child, just that one child with one adult, so it's just 1-to-1.
Okay, and how long does that normally take?
It depends on how quick the child is, but usually no more than sort of 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, that's great.
So we got Nikki.
Nikki?
Hiya. Yeah, it was just a quick question back to the writing. Is the requirement for the children to always be doing joined up writing?
Not for year one.
Not for year one. They'll be expected to start joining their writing in year 2, but at the moment we're really focusing on that letter formation.
Yeah. Okay.
And the sizing of the letters as well. So joining isn't a requirement in year 1. No.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Were there any more questions? I think we've got any more. No?
Okay.
Okay.
So what we'll do, we'll get Miss Walker to pop the PowerPoint up on the website for you. If you think of any other questions, then perhaps you can either email Miss Downs or myself or the office, and then we can add those to the PowerPoint as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you all for coming. And as I said, as Mrs. Palmer said, any questions, pop a note in their contact book or just send us an email, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got if you think of any later.